organisms, Vibrio cholerae, Aeromonas, and Pseudomonas, that are more or less similar to each other. Then he or she should be able to describe the treatment, prevention, and control of cholera. So, cholera is caused by Vibrio cholerae, as you know. So, Vibrios are basically curved gram-negative bacilli that are actively motile by means of a single polar flagella. That means these are gram-negative bacilli, rod-shaped bacteria, which are slightly curved or comma-shaped. All right, and they are actively motile by means of a single polar flagellum. That means there is a single flagella present at one of the end of the bacilli, by means of which it is highly motile. This term Vibrio is derived from its characteristic vibratory motility, and this organism was first isolated by Robert Koch, and he had named it as comma bacillus because of the comma shaped appearance or the curved appearance of the bacilli. So this is how a typical Vibrio or looks like. So this is the bacilli. You can appreciate it is slightly curved and flagella that is coming out of one of the end. That is a polar flagella. All right. So these Vibrio are ubiquitous. They are found worldwide. They are salt-loving organisms. That means they prefer to grow in areas and in water which is containing high content of salt, that is sodium chloride, the common salt. So they are found in marine environment, seawater and seafood, also in various other water bodies like surface water, river water or sewage. Alright, so Vibrio cholerae causes a devastating acute diarrheal disease that is known as cholera, you know this. And this cholera has been responsible for at least 7 global pandemics and several epidemics over the past 2 centuries. Alright. So Vibrio can be classified on the basis of their salt requirement, whether or not they require salt for their growth and how much or what concentration of salt they require, or what is the concentration of salt that they can tolerate. So they can be classified as non-halophilic, that means non-salt loving Vibrio, and halophilic Vibrio, that means salt loving Vibrio. So by non-halophilic we mean that they are able to grow without salt, but 1% of salt concentration is optimum for their growth. The salt is not mandatory, but they do grow better if salt is present. But they cannot grow at very high concentration of salt. Examples are Vibrio cholerae and Vibrio mimicus. Then there are halophilic Vibrio, which cannot grow in absence of salt. They must be provided with salt so that they can grow, and they can grow at much higher concentration of salts, up to 7 to 10% of NaCl. Examples are Vibrio parahemolyticus, Vibrio alginolyticus, and Vibrio vulnificus. So these are broad classification of Vibrio on the basis of their salt requirement. Another method to classify Vibrio is according to Gardner and Venkatraman classification. So this is a more practical kind of classification as far as Vibrios are concerned. So broadly, Vibrios have been classified into Vibrio cholerae and other Vibrio species. So Vibrio cholerae is the one which is causing cholera in human beings. So these Vibrio cholerae are then further divided according to their O antigen. If you remember in E. coli and other Enterobacteriaceae also, there is a somatic antigen, that is the O antigen, and based on what O antigen or what serotype of O antigen is there, they are divided into serogroups or serovars. Okay? So there are at least 200 O serogroups, but the most important one is the O1. Okay? O1 is the one which causes most of the cases of cholera. Then we also have another important serogroup, that is O139, and all the others are placed separately, which are sometimes known as non-O1 or non-O139. All right. So O1 is then further classified into 2 biotypes: classical biotype and LTOR. So biotype, when we say biotype, we mean what are the differences in biological properties of these two types of organisms, or these two groups of organisms. So these are known as biotypes because of differences in their biological properties. So they are classified as classical and LTOR, the O1 type. Then O1 is then further, both classical and LTOR are then further classified into serotypes, which are Ogawa, Inaba, and Ekojima. So serotypes and serogroups are basically classified on the basis of anti-sera. So anti-sera is nothing but antibodies which are prepared in some animal, mostly rabbits. So we use these antibodies which are derived from these rabbits, which have been infected or sensitized with that particular type of a Vibrio cholerae. For example, if you want to test for O1, then you would take a rabbit or some animal and infect it with that particular Vibrio cholerae or that particular antigen. So that animal would produce antibodies against that serotype or serogroup only. And then you take sera from that animal, and then you would use that sera to group or to type the bacteria that you have on your culture plate. Alright, so this is how serogrouping or serotyping is done. So this is the Gardner and Venkatraman classification for Vibrio. So O1 serogroup is agglutinated by O1 antisera, that is why it is known as O1 serogroup, and it has been responsible for almost all of the pandemics and most of the epidemics of cholera. Like I told you earlier, O1 serogroup is further classified into biotype classical and biotype LTOR. So classical, as the name suggests, is the one which is responsible for the earlier pandemics. First pandemic to sixth pandemic was caused by classical type, and the seventh pandemic, which is still going on, is caused by LTOR. So LTOR, why is it known as LTOR? It is known as LTOR because this type of Vibrio cholerae was first identified in a place known as LTOR, where various pilgrims returning from Hajj were kept in quarantine. So this type of Vibrio was first identified there. So this arrow is basically pointing towards a place called LTOR in Egypt, where this type was first isolated or first identified. Alright, so what are the differences between classical and LTOR biotypes? Like I told you, biotypes are known as biotypes because they have some differences in their biological properties. So on the basis of these properties, classical and LTOR biotypes can be differentiated. For example, the classical biotype is not able to cause hemolysis on sheep blood agar, whereas LTOR biotype is able to cause beta hemolysis on the sheep blood agar. Similarly, LTOR biotype is able to agglutinate chick RBCs. Susceptibility to polymyxin B, which is one of the antibiotics, is seen with classical biotype and not with LTOR biotype. So LTOR is resistant to polymyxin B. Then we have certain bacteriophages, various types of bacteriophages, which can infect either classical or LTOR. So group 4 phage will infect classical biotype. So classical biotype is susceptible to group 4 phage, and group 5 phage will infect LTOR. Okay, then VP test or the Vaux-Soslow test, which is used very frequently for gram-negative bacteria, is positive for LTOR biotype. And then there is also difference in the cholera toxin gene, CTX1 in classical and CTX2 in LTOR biotype. So these are the various biological differences between classical and LTOR biotypes. But over a period of time, it is seen that more or less these differences are becoming more and more. The line between them is not as strong as it used to be, because now many of the reactions are given by both of them. So both of them are not really very easily distinguishable these days. Alright. So coming to other serogroups other than O1. So these serogroups other than O1 were initially considered to be non-agglutinable vibrios or NAG vibrios. They were called so because they were not agglutinated by O1 antiserum. Okay. So it was thought that they are non-pathogenic initially. It was thought that they are non-pathogenic. Okay, but this term is actually not correct because they are not actually non-agglutinable. They are agglutinable by their own antisera. For example, O2 would be agglutinated by O2 antisera, O3 would be by O3 antiserums, and so on. But they are not agglutinated by O1 antiserum. And since O1 antiserum is the most common, O1 Vibrio are the most common. Hence, they were known as non-agglutinable Vibrios. But over a period of time, it was seen that O139 serogroup, it again suddenly began to cause several epidemics and outbreaks, especially in the coastal regions of India and in Bangladesh. This occurred since 1992. So O139, apart from O1, is another important serogroup of Vibrio cholerae. But apart from apart from O1 and O139, other serogroups are relatively very rare, and they may cause very rare or occasional outbreaks of diarrheal illnesses. Right. So coming on to pathogenesis of cholera, mode of transmission is fecal-oral route. That means the person suffering from cholera passes large number of bacteria in his stool, which contaminates the food or water, and this food or water is taken up by some other host. So that is the mode of transmission, that is ingestion of contaminated food or water. Then infective dose is quite high because this organism is very labile to acid. So acid which is present in the stomach provides a Vibrio cholerae. But if the bacteria are present in huge number, 10 to power 8 bacilli are consumed, then they are able to cause infection in the human being. So factors promoting transmission are the condition where gastric acidity is reduced, like hypochlorhydria or use of antacids, which reduce the acidity in the stomach. They promote cholera, infection by cholera. Okay. So this disease cholera is mainly due to a toxin which is produced by Vibrio cholerae. Both O1 and O139 are able to produce this cholera toxin, which results in this disease cholera. So for the organism to be able to cause disease, it has to pass, or it has to do at least three things. Okay. Firstly, it should be able to cross the protective layer of mucus. Okay. Our enteric canal is covered with protective layer of mucus, so the bacteria has to cross it. For that, it has got high or active motility because of the single polar flagella. It secretes various enzymes like mucinase and other proteolytic enzymes which can locally digest the mucous layer, and it also has heme-agglutinin proteases, also known as cholera-lectin, which cleaves the mucus and fibronectin. So by these methods, it is able to cross the protective layer of mucus. Subsequently, the next step is, once it has crossed the mucosal layer, the layer of mucus, it should be able to adhere and colonize the epithelium. Okay, for that, it has to basically fix itself on the epithelial surface. For that, it has got fimbria, or a special type of fimbria that is known as toxin co-regulated pilus, TCP, or toxin co-regulated pilus. So as the name suggests, toxin co-regulated pilus. Co-regulated means this pilus is co-regulated along with the toxin, the cholera toxin. So the same genes which are regulating the toxin production are also regulating this pilus, hence it is known as toxin co-regulated pilus. Then the third most important factor is presence of cholera toxin. So cholera toxin is the thing which actually results in various clinical manifestations of the disease. So this toxin resembles heat labile toxin of E. coli in its structure and function, but is much more potent than the LT of Escherichia coli. Alright. So what is the mechanism of cholera toxin? So this toxin is made up of two components, A and B. So there are 5 subunits of B, and A2, the A subunit has two parts, A1 and A2. Okay, so B is the binding fragment. So it helps to bind to the ganglioside receptors, which is present on the intestinal epithelial cell. And fragment A is the active fragment because it causes ATP ribosylation of G protein, okay, resulting in activation of adenyl cyclase, which results in accumulation of cyclic AMP. Okay, this increase in the cyclic AMP then results in accumulation of sodium chloride in the intestinal lumen. Okay, once there is increased sodium chloride present in the intestinal lumen, so the water which is present in the epithelial cells and intra and extracellular water, it basically moves passively into the lumen of the intestine. There is therefore accumulation of isotonic water in the intestinal lumen, and this is passed out as stool, resulting in watery diarrhea. Along with water and sodium and chloride, there is also loss of potassium and bicarbonate, resulting in shock because of severe dehydration and acidosis because of loss of bicarbonate. Alright, so this is the basic pathogenesis of how the Vibrio cholera is able to cause this disease, that is cholera. So the gene for cholera toxin CTX is actually coded by a bacteriophage. So this bacteriophage is able to infect Vibrio cholerae, and then it is able to give Vibrio cholerae this property that it will be able to produce cholera toxin. So this phage is basically integrated as a prophage into the Vibrio cholera chromosome. So this is a type of transduction, you can say. Okay. So this phage also encodes for the TCP, that is the toxin co-regulated pilus, and other accessory factors such as zonofludin toxin, various other colonization factors, and bacterial endotoxin. So all of them are kind of co-regulated, and majorly they are encoded by this bacteriophage. Alright, any questions till now? You can type in the question and I will try to answer before we move on. So coming to the next part, this was about, till now we discussed about pathogenesis of cholera. Coming to clinical manifestations of cholera. So cholera can be asymptomatic in majority of the cases. Up to 75% of the cases may be asymptomatic. In 20% of the cases, it may result in mild self-limiting diarrhea. But in 5% of the patients, it may result in sudden onset of explosive and life-threatening diarrhea. Okay. Cholera is also life-threatening disease. That means a lot of people actually lose their lives because of cholera. And as you will see, it has caused severe pandemics in the past, and the 7th pandemic is still going on. So cholera is a fatal disease. It can be fatal. So it has a short incubation period of 24 to 48 hours, maybe up to maximum 5 days. And the main clinical presentation is sudden onset of profuse, painless, watery diarrhea. So this watery diarrhea is the main clinical presentation in cholera, which is actually responsible for water loss, dehydration, and sometimes death of the patient. So this watery stool is actually known as rice water stool. So the stool is basically nothing but all water which is containing mucus flakes and is odorless or has inoffensive odor. It is rich in bicarbonate and it is an isotonic solution with the blood. So it is known as rice water stool because it is resembling the water in which rice has been washed. ठीक है, जब water में rice wash करते हैं तो it becomes kind of turbid and whitish, but it is actually very watery. The stool of such cholera patients is very watery. The actual stool content is not there. There is only water and mucus flakes that are with cholera. There is also vomiting, but fever is usually absent. All these things result in diminution or loss of extracellular fluid, hemo concentration, that means blood, and death. So the death is mainly because of severe dehydration. So common complications that can be seen in cholera in severe cases are muscular cramps, renal failure, pulmonary edema, cardiac arrhythmias, paralytic ileus. All of them are basically because of severe dehydration or electrolyte imbalance. So LTOR variants are causing generally somewhat milder infections, and some more proportion of patients are asymptomatic. So LTOR is generally considered to be a milder form than the classical O1 Vibrio cholerae. Alright. So coming to the epidemiology part of cholera. So historically, cholera has been a very important disease. It can cause either sporadic or limited outbreaks. It can be endemic. It can cause epidemics, or it can cause pandemics. So I hope you know the meaning of these words. Okay, pandemic, everybody knows now, a disease which has rapidly spread throughout the world and is causing havoc throughout the world. Epidemic is sudden increase in number of cases, but that remain somewhat localized to a city or a state or a smaller area. Endemic is a disease which is always present in a particular area. So, for example, tuberculosis is endemic. It can be said to be endemic in India because it is always present in same prevalence throughout the area. And outbreaks are relatively much smaller numbers which are localized to a small area. So cholera can cause outbreaks, it can cause pandemics, epidemics, and it can be endemic to a particular area. So till 19th century, cholera was basically confined to India only, Indian subcontinent, mainly West Bengal and Bangladesh area. But from 1817 to 1923, it caused 6 pandemics, majority of which originated from Bengal, and all of them were caused by classical type of Vibrio cholerae. Okay. So the sixth pandemic, it ended in 1923, and after that till 1961 it restricted itself again to mostly its homeland, that is West Bengal and Bangladesh and Indian subcontinent. But after 1961 began the seventh pandemic, which we'll discuss later. So the first pandemic that began in 1817 was more or less confined to Asia only. It began in Bengal, then it spread to other countries of the Southeast Asia, like like Thailand, China, all these countries. But it remained more or less confined to Asia. But second pandemic onwards, it began to spread to involve even the developed countries like Americas and various countries of the Europe. And the third pandemic, which started in 1852 to 1859, was the deadliest pandemic because it led to death of millions of humans. So third pandemic by Vibrio is said to be the deadliest. So during the third pandemic in London in 1854, Dr. John Snow identified that one particular water pump or the hand pump which was used in those days was likely source of the disease, and he suggested that this hand pump should be removed. And when they did, the disease incidence it dropped down. So it was in 1854 that people realized that cholera is being caused by contaminated food and water. Okay, before that, all the pandemics that had happened till then People did not know what is causing the disease, why people are falling sick, why people are dying. They knew nothing about it. So it was only in 1854 that Dr. Johnson was able to categorically out probably this is the uh, source from which people are getting cholera. So this gentleman is Dr. Johnson, and he is considered to be father of modern epidemiology because in those days when people didn't know much, he was able to plot a map. This map is basically showing the households which were showing cases of cholera, and he then concluded that all these cases are localized around a source of water or the hand pump from which various households were drinking water. So by making this map, he was able to conclude that probably all the cases are linked somehow to this particular water pump, and when it was closed, the cases began to subside. So the seventh pandemic, which began in 1961, was different from the first six pandemics in many ways. So it was the only pandemic which originated outside India. So pandemics first to six were Indian in origin, but this one originated from Indonesia in 1961. India was affected around 3 or 4 years later in 1964, and the whole world was encircled by 1991. So this is the only pandemic that was caused by the L-Tor variant or the L-Tor biotype. And this seventh pandemic is still going on. So coming on to O139 or the Bengal strain, which was first identified in Chennai, but it was named Bengal strain because of the Bay of Bengal, because it spread rapidly along the coastal regions of Bay of Bengal. So this is another strain which raised concern that maybe this can replace the O1 and become the new dominant strain. But initially it caused a lot of diseases, a lot of cases, but subsequently it died down, and again L-Tor replaced O139. So O139 is the Bengal strain. So currently cholera is a notifiable disease. That means any patient coming to a doctor or health facility with cholera has to be reported to the authorities. So still it is resulting in thousands of deaths. So cholera is still causing a lot of deaths in India and in other undeveloped countries, mainly in African countries. So in India, the situation has changed greatly. The number of cases has come down over a period of time as the hygienic conditions have improved. Morbidity and mortality have greatly reduced, and NICED in Kolkata, that is the National Institute for Cholera and Enteric Diseases, is the National Reference Center for Cholera in India. In our lab at Maulana Azad Medical College also, we are during the rainy seasons, we are also isolating cholera. Approximately 1 or 2 cases per week can be there, especially during the rainy season, the monsoon seasons. So reservoir for Vibrio cholerae are humans only. So it doesn't cause disease in other animals. It causes diseases in human beings only, which also act as reservoirs. Asymptomatic cases or carriers. Carriers are basically people who are infected with the pathogen, but they are not showing any symptom. They just help in transmitting the disease further. So asymptomatic cases or carriers can play an important role in spread of infection. High temperature, heavy rainfall, flooding, all are favorable for spread of cholera. Other factors such as poor sanitation, poverty, overcrowding, high mobility of the people moving in and out, all these are favorable for transmission of cholera. Okay. Then how do you diagnose a case of cholera? So clinically, a patient is suspected to be suffering from cholera if he is passing rice water stools with vomiting, with severe dehydration. It is a telltale sign of clinical sign of cholera, but we have to confirm it in the laboratory to label it as a classical case of cholera. So for that, specimen that is collected are the stool, because the stool or the fecal sample would be containing large number of the bacteria, which we have to try to isolate on culture plates and then identify it. Alright. So for that, we have to transport the stool sample to the laboratory, and if it is not immediately transferable, that means within 1 or 2 hours the sample cannot reach the laboratory, then we have to use certain transport media. VR media or the Venkatraman Ramakrishnan medium, VR medium, Venkatraman Ramakrishnan medium, or the carrier Blair medium. So these transport media can be used if there is likely to be a delay from the point of collection of stool. Suppose a patient is residing in a village and the lab is in some city, so it would take around 12 to 24 hours to transport the specimen. Then you would have to use the transport media so that the bacteria doesn't die during transport. So direct microscopy of the stool sample, if you do gram staining of the stool sample directly, then you may be able to appreciate presence of gram negative rods, which are short and curved, comma shaped, and this appearance is known as fish in stream appearance, because the bacilli, they appear to be arranged in parallel rows like the fish moves in a stream. And hanging drop of stool, it would demonstrate darting motility or swarm of gnats appearance. So darting motility, by darting motility we mean कि Vibrio cholera shows very fast or very rapid movement, so fast that you cannot trace it. I mean, you cannot trace the path that is taken by an individual bacteria. It moves so fast, like a dart. And when a large number of bacilli are present, they would move randomly and swiftly that resemble a swarm of gnats. Gnats are nothing but tiny flying insects that मतलब एक गुच्छे में there are huge number of flies when they are moving. The motility of Vibrio resembles that. So this is the fish in stream appearance that I was talking about. You can appreciate कि a gram stain that is prepared from stool would show fish in stream appearance. Okay, that means all these bacilli are slightly curved and they are arranged more or less in parallel kind of rows. So this is what you see in gram staining, and on hanging drop you will see darting motility or the swarm of gnats appearance, also known as shooting star motility, because again the motility is so fast that you cannot trace it. So these are very rapidly motile organisms. So after microscopy, the stool has to be cultured on culture plates, जिससे कि you will be able to grow the bacteria and then identify it. Alright. So you know what is enrichment broth. This must have been taught to you in previous classes. So we have to use enrichment broth especially because stool is actually a large mix of organisms. It contains huge number of colonizers, Escherichia coli, Klebsiella, Pseudomonas, and a lot of anaerobic bacteria are there. And it also contains the pathogenic organism which is responsible for causing diarrhea, in this case Vibrio cholerae. Okay, so you have to grow Vibrio cholerae, but you don't want to let the commensal bacteria like Klebsiella or Escherichia coli to grow in your culture plate. So for that you use enrichment broth, which would stimulate or enhance or let the pathogenic organisms to grow while delaying the growth of commensal organisms. So these are the enrichment broth. And for Vibrio cholera, we are using alkaline peptone water and Mansour's taurocolate tellurite peptone water. So these two are the enrichment broth that are commonly used for Vibrio cholera. And if you note, the pH for both of them is alkaline because Vibrio cholera hates acidity, है ना? So it loves salt and it loves alkaline pH. So almost all the media that we have used for Vibrio cholerae have alkaline media. So it grows better in alkaline media, and alkaline pH also inhibits other commensal bacteria. So that is the advantage of keeping the pH towards alkaline. Then we have to culture on selective media like bile salt agar, Monsour's GTTA agar, and TCBS agar. Again, all of them are having alkaline pH, and they also have certain chemicals which will again inhibit the contaminating commensal organisms which are otherwise always present in the stool. So we have bile salt agar. Bile, it contains bile salts, sodium deoxycholate or taurocolate, which would inhibit the gram-negative and gram-positive organisms. Then we have Monsour's GTT agar, which contains gelatin, taurocolate, trypticase, telluride. So GTT, triple T. So taurocolate and telluride, they are again selective agents. They would inhibit the growth of commensals and gram-positive bacteria. So on GTT agar, Vibrio will grow as small translucent colonies with grayish black center. On bile salt agar, I missed that earlier. On bile salt agar, it grows absolutely transparent colonies are there, which are sometimes called as oil drop appearance because they resemble the drop of the oil. They are so transparent. Then on TCBS, they form yellow colonies because TCBS has a sugar which is sucrose, and Vibrio cholerae is able to ferment sucrose, so it produces yellow colonies. Other Vibrios like Vibrio parahemolyticus, they don't ferment sucrose, so they would give green colonies. So TCBS stands for thiosulfate, citrate, bile salts, and sucrose. These are the components of this medium. It also grows on MacConkey agar, where it produces non-lactose fermenting or pale colonies, which then later become LLF, late lactose fermenters, may gradually become pink over a period of time. So this media on the top left media, the green one, this is Monsour's GTTA media. You can appreciate that there are colonies with black center, and there is a halo around it. This halo is because of gelatin. जो इस मीडिया में जो gelatin होता है, Vibrio is able to liquefy it. जिस वजह से हर कॉलोनी के अराउंड there is a halo. This is TCBS. TCBS में Vibrio cholerae produces yellow colonies. Vibrio parahemolyticus will produce green colonies because cholerae it ferments sucrose and parahemolyticus doesn't ferment sucrose. Then this is bile salt agar, on which you can appreciate oil drop colonies. They are absolutely transparent colonies. Then you can do from the culture plate, you can do gram staining and do hanging drop preparation. Again, you will be able to see curved gram-negative bacilli, and the bacteria would demonstrate darting motility. Identification by various biochemical methods: catalase and oxidase positive, indole positive, citrate utilization test is variable, urease is not produced, the TSI or the triple sugar iron it gives A by A, that means acid by acid reaction without gas. H2S is not produced. So these are typical biochemical reactions which help in identification of Vibrio cholerae. Then another important test is that it gives string test positive. I'll show you in the next slide what is string test. And it also produces hemodigestion on blood agar. So basically blood agar when it is grown, it doesn't show hemolysis as such, but it may show hemodigestion, that is enzymatic digestion of the RBCs, which results in greenish discoloration of the blood agar. So this is hemodigestion. You can appreciate that there is a greenish discoloration of the blood agar because of enzymatic digestion. Then this is TCBS that I showed you earlier also, and the last figure, that is the string test. Basically in string test, what is done is that you take a slide, and slide pe you take a drop of 0.5% sodium deoxycholate, then जो कल्चर प्लेट पे आपके पास विब्रियो कॉलोरी की ग्रोथ है, उस लूप से लेकर आप 0.5% सोडियम डिऑक्सीकोलेट मिक्स करते हैं, एंड देन व्हेन यू लिफ्ट द लूप अ स्ट्रिंग इज फॉर्म्ड, बिकॉज जो ग्रोथ है इट बिकम्स काइंड ऑफ म्यूकॉइड, तो म्यूकस टाइप ऑफ मटेरियल की स्ट्रिंग बन जाती है. सो दिस इज नोन एज स्ट्रिंग टेस्ट सीन विद विब्रियो कॉलोरी. ऑलराइट, देन सीरोटाइपिंग, बायोटाइपिंग, सीरो ग्रुपिंग वो सब आप कर सकते हो, जैसे मैंने पहले बताया था आपको. Then antimicrobial susceptibility testing to test which antibiotics may be useful in particular case, and then we also always have molecular methods which help in identification of the bacteria. So treatment for cholera is mostly fluid replacement. ठीक है, एंटीबायोटिक जनरली अवॉइड करते हैं, नहीं देनी होती, बिकॉज दे डोंट हैव मच रोल इन ट्रीटमेंट ऑफ कॉलेरा. Fluid replacement is the most important measure. अगर mild या moderate fluid loss है, then oral rehydration solution ORS would be sufficient. If there is severe diarrhea in which the patient is not accepting oral fluids या फिर बहुत ज़्यादा severe dehydration है, then IV fluid replacement with ringer lactate or normal saline. ठीक है, जब patient conscious हो जाता है, then again you start with ORS. So ORS and fluid rehydration and replenishment is the mainstay of treatment of cholera. Antibiotics have relatively lesser role or minor role to play because pathogenesis is mainly toxin mediated and the bacteria itself is self-limiting. It doesn't always live in the human body, it dies on its own. So antibiotics may be used only in severely dehydrated or it helps in fastening or hastening the clearance of organism from the stool. That is the main use of antibiotic in cholera. So various antibiotics like azithromycin or erythromycin, doxy, tetracycline or ciprofloxacin are mainly used for treatment. But again, I am telling you key antibiotics are not usually given in cholera cases. ORS or fluid replenishment is the mainstay of treatment. Include general measures like safe and clean drinking water, sanitary disposal of feces. The feces should not get mixed with the drinking water, especially in villages. People who pass stool near the water bodies and then that same water is consumed. Such measures they lead to outbreaks and epidemics of cholera. Proper food sanitization, prompt outbreak investigation and steps to reduce transmission, notification of the cases to authorities, education of the people, what is cholera, how it spreads in the masses. All these things can help in preventing cholera. Then chemoprophylaxis means some medicine that can be given in close contacts of patients. Because family member किसी को cholera हुआ है तो उसके जो immediate family members हैं या known to हैं उनको you can give chemoprophylaxis like tetracycline to prevent them from developing that disease. So this is known as chemoprophylaxis. So apart from chemoprophylaxis, we also have immunoprophylaxis. That means vaccines. So we have certain vaccines against cholera. So initially what we used to have was injectable vaccines, but they had very limited efficacy. Because cholera being an intestinal disease, we need to have mucosal immunity as well. So जो injectable vaccines होते हैं mucosal immunity नहीं provide कर पाती हैं. तो इसलिए we have now oral cholera vaccines जिनको orally दिया जाता है. Alright. So in oral cholera vaccine, we have two main types. One is the killed whole cell vaccine and another is oral live attenuated vaccine. So as the name suggests, killed whole cell vaccine means कि Vibrio cholera as such लिया आपने या for some modified form of Vibrio cholera लिया एंड उसको किल कर दिया बाय वेरियस मेथड, आइदर हीट या फिर कुछ केमिकल डालकर, एंड देन दैट इज गिवन टू अ पर्सन, and that organism is dead, so it won't be able to cause disease, but since उसका antigenic structure preserved in the human being, that would protect from further infection by Vibrio cholera. ठीक है, so that is the principle behind killed whole cell vaccine. And we also have oral live attenuated vaccine. That means we take a particular strain of Vibrio cholera, ठीक है, जो कि वीक है, बहुत ज्यादा वीक है, मतलब अलाइव है, बट it doesn't have some properties which help it to cause disease. It is not able to cause disease in human beings. मतलब नॉन पैथोजेनिक टाइप का स्ट्रेन है, ठीक है, उसको लाइव देते हैं जिससे कि अगेन इट विल नॉट बी एबल टू कॉज डिजीज, बट उसके अगेंस्ट बॉडी जब इम्यूनिटी बनाएगी तो दैट इम्यूनिटी वुड प्रोटेक्ट अगेंस्ट फ्यूचर इन्फेक्शंस बाय विब्रियो कॉलेरा. ठीक है. So oral cholera vaccine में examples are whole cell vaccine composed of killed whole cells of Vibrio cholerae O1 and O139. इंडिया में सैंकॉल के नाम से आती है एंड साउथ कोरिया एंड बाकी कंट्रीज में यूवी कॉल के नाम से आती है. ठीक है. It gives good protection for around 3 years. So 2 doses have to be given. This is one type of vaccine, whole cell or WCE vaccine. Then another type of oral cholera vaccine is whole cell recombinant B subunit vaccine. Recombinant B subunit vaccine means whole cell तो है ही, मतलब वो killed बैक्टीरिया तो है ही, उसके साथ जो टॉक्सिन का B सबयूनिट होता है वो भी एडेड होता है इसके अंदर. ठीक है, फॉर बेटर इम्यूनोलॉजिकल रिस्पॉन्स. एग्जाम्पल इज ड्यूक ओरल. Another type is oral live attenuated vaccine, Vaxchora. It is mainly given in travelers who are traveling to countries like India, because जो western countries होती हैं, they have not been exposed to many of the diseases which are prevalent in countries like India because of hygienic conditions which are not very good. So they suffer from what is known as travelers diarrhea, and Vibrio cholera is an important cause of travelers diarrhea. So to prevent such type of diarrhea in travelers coming to countries like India or other Southeast Asian countries, this vaccine may be given to protect them against Vibrio cholera during their short trip. So this was about O1 and O139 Vibrio cholera that we talked till now. Coming briefly to non-O1 and non-O139 Vibrio cholera, like I told you, they are resembling, but they are Vibrio cholerae only, but their serotype is different. Serogroup is different. That means they do not agglutinate with O1 or O139 antiserum. They rarely cause disease in human beings. So that they will cause gastroenteritis only, but very rare. ठीक है. Coming to halophilic Vibrio, जो Vibrio cholerae and Vibrio mimicus है, they are non-halophilic. Coming to halophilic Vibrio, important one includes Vibrio parahemolyticus. ठीक है. So these halophilic Vibrio can stand high salt concentration more than 6%. ठीक है. Vibrio cholera जो है 6% से ऊपर नहीं ग्रो कर पाता, जबकि halophilic Vibrio are able to grow above 6% of salt concentration. So Vibrio parahemolyticus was first reported in Japan, and it has also been reported in India, particularly in Calcutta and similar coastal areas. So it basically causes food-borne gastroenteritis. ठीक है. Presents as watery diarrhea या फिर dysentery. ठीक है. Dysentery differs from diarrhea in that कि dysentery में there is also presence of blood and mucus in stool. ठीक है. Along with fever and abdominal cramps, वो सब होते हैं dysentery में. ठीक है. So Vibrio cholera है, that doesn't cause dysentery. It only causes watery diarrhea. जबकि parahemolyticus, it can cause dysentery. So this is an important difference between these two. ठीक है. ग्राम स्टेनिंग पे इट शोज बाइपोलर स्टेनिंग, मतलब दोनों पोल्स पे ज्यादा स्टेन लेता है. ठीक है. It is motile by polar and peritrichous flagella. मतलब it is capable of producing both types of flagella, polar as well as peritrichous flagella. On TCBS, it produces green colonies because it is a non-fermenter of sucrose. It doesn't ferment sucrose, so it produces green colonies. Another important properties are Kanagawa phenomenon. It shows swarming on blood agar and it can resist high concentration of sodium chloride. So these three properties help in distinguishing Vibrio cholera and Vibrio parahemolyticus. So Kanagawa phenomenon is that it uses a special agar that is known as Wakatsuma agar. So these are Japanese names as you can make out. So Wakatsuma agar is a high salt concentration wala blood agar. Okay, so only parahemolyticus will be able to show beta hemolysis on it because of presence of this hemolysin, which is thermostable direct hemolysin. So this is the name of the hemolysin, which is able to lyse blood agar, resulting in hemolysis on this type of blood agar, Wakatsuma agar. And this also indicates that this particular parahemolyticus is virulent. Okay, because virulence thermostable direct hemolysin is also important, which also causes hemolysis. ठीक है, तो अगर ये वाली hemolysin इसके पास होगा तो it will cause both beta hemolysis and it is also capable of causing disease in human beings. So that is why Kanagawa phenomenon is important. When swarming means it is able to grow on blood agar and spread out, forming a thin layer. ठीक है, otherwise normally जब bacteria grow करते हैं तो it forms individual colonies, but parahemolyticus can spread out and form thin layers like this. ठीक है, अगर parahemolyticus center में आपने inoculate किया then it would spread out, showing swarming. This is known as swarming growth. Then another Vibrio is Vibrio vulnificus. It is also halophilic and it results in sepsis या फिर wound infection. ठीक है, mainly halophilic है तो marine water में होता है generally. तो वहां पर अगर marine water में किसी को चोट लग रही है, कोई जा रहा है, तो it can cause wound infection and sepsis. Then another is Vibrio alginolyticus. Again, it causes various forms of eye, ear, and wound infections. So all these are halophilic bacteria. Parahemolyticus हो गया, vulnificus हो गया, alginolyticus हो गया. All these are halophilic. They are able to grow at very high salt concentrations. Then last organism that we are going to discuss is Aeromonas. Very briefly, not very in depth. So Aeromonas is basically it was placed earlier in the same family as Vibrio cholerae, family Vibrionaceae, but has now been assigned a different family, Aeromonadaceae. Okay, it resembles more or less like Vibrio because it is also oxidase positive. It is also showing similar reactions. So it was earlier placed in same family as Vibrio, but now it has been placed in a separate family. So over 85% of the human infections that are caused by Aeromonas are caused by these three species: Aeromonas hydrophilia, Aeromonas caviae, and Aeromonas vironae. So these are the three important species, and it can cause various diseases like gastroenteritis, wound infections, bacteremia, respiratory tract infection like pneumonia. So these are various infections caused by Aeromonas. Gastroenteritis it does cause, but very frequently Aeromonas is also present as a commensal. So it is very difficult to make out whether Aeromonas is actually responsible for diarrhea in a particular individual, because it can both cause gastroenteritis and can also be present as a commensal in the intestine. Okay, various virulence factors of Aeromonas. Then treatment, it is susceptible to ciprofloxacin and levofloxacin, the fluoroquinolones, and 4 times or yes, but resistance to various antibiotics is emerging rapidly, especially in Aeromonas. And beta-lactamase production होता है, तो beta-lactam antibiotics होती हैं, penicillin वगैरह, उनके लिए it can very easily become resistant. Okay. So Plesiomonas, just one side of Plesiomonas. Plesiomonas again was placed earlier along with Vibrio only. So these three organisms, Vibrio, Aeromonas, and Plesiomonas, are somewhat similar to each other. All of them are oxidase positive, oxidase test positive, and all of them were originally placed together. But now Plesiomonas has been placed along with Enteromonas, although it shows some differences from them, but some genetic studies they showed that Plesiomonas is more related to Enterobacteriaceae, members of Enterobacteriaceae like E. coli, Shigella, rather than Vibrio. So it has been removed from Vibrionaceae and it has been placed in Enterobacteriaceae. So it has got only one species, that is Plesiomonas shigelloides. Plesiomonas shigelloides, and it is also associated with sometimes gastrointestinal disease, gastroenteritis, या फिर rarely extraintestinal infections can also be there. Okay. So Plesiomonas is one exception in the Enterobacteriaceae family that is showing oxidase positive reaction. ठीक है, सारे Enterobacteriaceae के members E. coli, Shigella, Salmonella, ये सारे जो होते हैं they are oxidase negative, but Plesiomonas is oxidase positive. So that is one exception in Enterobacteriaceae family. Okay. So these were about these organisms, Vibrio, Aeromonas, and Plesiomonas. Alright. So any questions? Anything that you haven't understood? So some